So we are reading Water, You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty by Dr. Batman Gilich. We are on chapter 2, page number 21 of the PDF.
Chapter 2. Water, water everywhere, yet not enough did we drink. Water, water everywhere, still our bodies did shriek and shrink. Water, the bizarre and the simple. The human body is about 75% water and 25% solid matter. The brain is said to be 85% water and is extremely sensitive to any dehydration or depletion of its water content.
So this is very important, right? The brain has priority in getting water. So the body will draw water from all other organs and other systems if the brain needs water, because the brain cannot survive without water.
The brain is bathed constantly in salty cerebrospinal fluid. The water content of the body is called the solvent, and the solid matter that is dissolved in the water is called the solute. The chemical understanding of the human body brought about an almost total concentration of research into the detailed molecular composition and minute fluctuations of the solid matter in the body.
So this is the normal way of diagnosis, right? Normal way of studying anything, that what's the solid matter. They're not looking at the other stuff. For example, when we are looking at when the dark field microscope was actually developed, the all these studies have been done on slides of dead matter, dead cells. But when you can see the live blood cells, for example, or the live things under a dark field microscope, the amount of data that you can garner from them is very, very different and much more alive. In the same way over here, you're looking at the dead matter, the what is dissolved in the liquid, right? You're not looking at the liquid itself. That creates a big issue and problem.
Thus, a chemical pharmaceutical perception of the human body took shape, resulting in the development of the medical industrial system. Adherence to the understanding that it is primarily the body's solid composition that governs all its functions has produced much misinformation and has contributed to the present chaotic status of medicine. The flaw in the above approach to understanding the body lies in the fact that, even with all our amassed knowledge, the human body is still an almost unknown structure. We know no more than 10% of how the body functions and is integrated chemically.
So we do not really understand, when a chemical is secreted, why it's secreted, how it's secreted, how does the body actually analyze what is the quantity of the secretion that needs to be made, etc., etc. Right? It's really finely tuned, and no amount of external diagnosis, etc., can actually monitor what is really happening inside the physical body.
The practice of clinical medicine today benefits the manufacturing and commercial arms of the healthcare system. The ignorance promoting and money making solutes focus is strictly guarded and forcefully dispensed. It
Just
is
one
good
second.
for selling drugs. The ignorance promoting and money making solute focus is strictly guarded and forcefully dispensed. It is good for selling drugs. Although the knowledge of the physiology of the human body is advanced, the practice of clinical medicine does not benefit from the advancement of this discipline of science.
So again, naturally, everything is tuned towards making money, right? Now, if a person is not sick, they're not going to go to the hospital, they're not going to buy drugs. And that's why drugs are promoted. I mean, today, I mean, it's sorry to say, but anytime you talk to any kind of any doctor about the natural methods or the alternate therapies, 90% of them will debunk it, right? Without even understanding what it's all about, they will straight away debunk it because they don't know otherwise and they're not willing to know also, which is really a sad case.
We are still water dependent. The role of water in the bodies of all living species, humans included, has not changed since the earliest creation of life in water. When life on land became an objective, the stressful adventure beyond known boundaries and the immediate vicinity of water supply, a gradually refined body water preservation system and drought management system had to be created. In other words, the body began to adapt to transient dehydration. Over time, this drought management process became permanent and currently exists in the body of modern humans.
So naturally, first animals were totally in water. This is the theory of evolution, right? So now the point becomes that if you were totally always in water, you didn't need to really bother about how much water there was available within the body because it was there in ample supply. As we started moving out and water sources became depleted, a system developed in the body and a prioritization started to develop in the body as to which area in the body or which system gains priority over another system. So you'll find that there is a systematic shutdown of stuff in our body system when water is not available. Of course, as I mentioned, the brain gets priority in water supply. The body will take away water from any other part of the body to supply water to the brain.
Even now, when humans
Shimangla, we can't hear you.
Even now, when humans are under stress or confronting situations that may be perceived as stressful, the physiological translation of that stress reflects a water regulation process. It is as if nothing has changed from the first time water-dwelling species ventured beyond their water supply. A similar process for rationing water reserves and an anticipated limited future supply becomes the responsibility of a complex system in the body. This multi-system water distribution process remains in operation until the body receives unmistakable signals that it has once more gained access to an adequate water supply.
So now this is again very important, right? Now, if the body senses that there is no water supply available, it will start putting drought management systems into place. This is one of the main reasons of water retention in the body also. Lack of water supply, right? And we feel that if there is water retention, you need to reduce the water intake. According to this system, you need to actually increase the water intake, right? The other fact is that whenever we are stressed out, whenever the sympathetic nervous system is activated, you will find that the body pulls in the water. It starts to suck in the water because water is a very, very important resource that the body has. The body cannot survive without water. So you'll find when we do energetics, right, when we go and rectify houses of people, etc., and we can actually check the energy fields where there's a depletion and where there's an uplifting energy. I regularly tell clients to stand in a depleted zone and feel the moisture in their tongue. And I make them take one step back or one step forward that crosses the line where that line of deviation is. And immediately the tongue starts to get more moisture as soon as they go into a zone which is not stressed. So this is very, very clear that whenever the body is under stress, the body will suck in the water supply from the peripheries. And as we discussed, asthma, right? Asthma also, when we are breathing, we are all constantly releasing water vapor. This you can actually observe when you are in a cold climate. When you breathe out, you'll see the water vapor coming out. So in the act of breathing, we are actually losing a lot of water vapor also. That's why asthma gets created. The body tries to again, it's a ulta kind of mechanism, but the body tries to restrain the breathing process also. That's why people start getting asthma, because it wants to control the water supply.
One of the unavoidable processes in the body water rationing phase is the ruthlessness with which the body functions are monitored. No structure receives more than its predetermined share of water based on its functional importance. The brain takes absolute priority over all the other systems.
So I've already told you all this, that every system is allocated a certain amount of water. The rationing is always on, and the brain takes, priority over all other systems.
Thinking that tea, coffee, alcohol, and manufactured beverages can substitute for the pure natural water needs of the body is an elementary mistake, particularly in a body that is stressed by confronting daily problems. It is true that these beverages contain water, but most of them also contain dehydrating substances such as caffeine.
So again, all manufactured beverages, in fact, even juices cannot be considered as water. The body needs pure water, right? You cannot consider the liquids in other foods, etc., to be as a substitute for the water that you need to consume.
These substances rid the body of the water they are dissolved in, plus additional water from the body's reserves.
So again, substances like caffeine and other substances, they actually need water to be processed through the system. So they actually draw the water from the system rather than give water to the system. So it's said that if you drink one soft drink, you need to drink 10 glasses of water to counter the effects of that one glass of soft drink, because the chemicals, etc., which are there in that soft drink need to be cleansed using 10 glasses of water, right? So now you may think that I'm drinking a beverage and it has water in it, but it's actually utilizing more water from the system than what you're putting in by drinking that beverage.
When you drink coffee, tea, or even a beer, your body gets rid of more water than is contained in the drink. If you measure your urine volume after the beverage is taken, you will see that you have passed more urine than the volume of the drink. Another way the body loses water after drinking hot beverages is through perspiration from the pores of the skin to cool the body that has been warmed from the inside.
Now, the point here is that if you're drinking a warm beverage, one of the ways of detoxification of the body is also the sweating process. Of course, the urine is a detoxification process, the feces is a detoxification process, but even sweating is also a detoxification process. But of course, the sweat, if you're consuming less water and you're losing more water from the various elimination system, then again you are in trouble, because the body is becoming water deficit.
The economic principles are the same in the body as they are in society. The law of supply and demand rules absolutely. When there is a comparative shortage of a needed substance, a strict rationing system rules the marketplace of the body with an iron fist.
So again, whenever there's a war, etc., things go into rationing, right? So like that, whenever the body is stressed, the drought management system of the body kicks in and rationing starts.
When the human body is dehydrated, it redistributes and regulates the amount of available water. Within the body, alarms signal to show that areas in question are in short supply, much like the light signal that goes on when a car is running low on gas or oil. The available water is rationed and used where needed. The presence of water will ultimately regulate the production mechanisms in a drought-stricken area of the body.
So again, whenever, like for example, when you have pains in the body, right? It's one of the signals that the body is saying of dehydration, because the toxins which are there in the body, which are produced due to the metabolism process of the cells, is stuck and it is not getting cleared up, right? So like that, whenever there is a pressure in any area in the body, symptoms will start to show up, right? But the body will still give priority to, they have a structure, there's a structure to which where the water will go when there is a shortage of water, and that will be strictly adhered to. Even if, I mean, today you may end up cutting your hand, right, for that matter, but the body is more focused on survival, so the hand may not be required at that time, so the body will be willing to sacrifice the arm in view of letting the whole body survive. So things like that will start to happen. So the body will start sacrificing stuff.
When chronic dehydration begins to set in, up to a certain level, the shutdown of water-dependent functions is silent because there is a reserve capacity for endurance. As time passes and the body becomes more and more dehydrated, however, a threshold is reached where the system becomes inadequate for the responsibilities thrust on one or another function of the body. Depending on the type of demand, the organ or organs in the firing line of activity begin to indicate their particular signal of inadequacy.
So now, slow and steady, the shutdown of systems start to take place. They start giving out stress signals, but if there's no water available, then there's no water available. Slowly and steadily, they will start to shut down.
While the various signals produced by the water distributors and drought managers indicate regional body thirst and drought and can naturally and simply be relieved by an increased intake of water, they are instead often improperly and ignorantly dealt with by highly potent chemical products. Because many doctors are not educated about the symptoms of dehydration and the importance of the fluid in the body, they often diagnose the problem incorrectly. Many physicians mistake dehydration for one or another disease and treat the symptoms with medication rather than water. The result: pharmaceutical companies get rich, patients are not cured, and doctors are helpless in dealing with often recurring disease states of the body.
So again, so if there is a symptom, right, the doctors do not know and understand it's due to dehydration, and then they will prescribe chemical pills, which again need more water for them to be processed through the system. So it becomes a vicious cycle where the patient doesn't get better, right? So the importance of drinking water cannot be ignored. It's very, very simple.
Silencing the different signal systems of water shortage in the body with chemical products can be immediately detrimental to the patient's body cells, including the genetic apparatus. Chronic dehydration can have a permanently damaging impact on a person's descendants.
So now how does this happen, right? When you have a chronic dehydration, it can affect genetic matter. So when conception takes place, that message is encoded in the genetic matter of the dehydration, right? And then that can result in a disease in the child also.
While the human body is
Shivanga, we
entirely
can't hear you.
While the human body is entirely dependent on the many complicated functions of water for its survival, it has not developed a water storage system in the same way it stores fat. The dehydration produced loss of body efficiency and resulting loss of chemical know-how and function in one generation can be projected onto the next generation.
So again, through the DNA transformation or mutation. And of course, the body has the capacity to create fat, right? It stores fat as a way of storing energy. But one of the reasons why it creates fat is also for detoxification. If again there's not enough water in the system and the toxicity of the body is not getting cleared out, the body generates fat so that the toxins are stored in the fat. So one of the things I keep repeating is that when you go into a weight loss program, you will find that first you lose muscle mass and then you lose the fat. The body doesn't want to touch the fat, right? Simply because the toxicity which is stored in the fat, it doesn't want to touch it. So it's the fat is the last thing to lose when you start losing weight.
If the root cause of a disease state is dehydration, the same malfunctioning sensor systems that permit dehydration to establish in an individual can eventually be inherited by some of the offspring. This is why asthma, allergies, and heartburn are very serious conditions that should be prevented by full hydration at all times. It is essential to become educated about the functions of water in the body at all ages. This is how disease can be prevented in individuals and the next generation descendants.
So again, the body requires and needs a certain amount of water depending on what your activity is, what your age is, where are you living, etc., etc.
We must learn to recognize the symptoms of dehydration and understand that the treatment is simple. Water. It's vital to our health. In an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, September 20, 1984, Dr. Paddy Phillips and 7 associates showed that elderly men were far less able to recognize their body thirst than younger men in the same experimental setting.
So again, the sensory perception of dehydration in older people is less. They forget that they need to drink water. Younger people generally sense they're thirsty much faster than older people.
When the elderly were dehydrated, they seemed not to feel thirsty. Even when blood tests showed an obvious water shortage in the body, and even when water was within reach, some of the persons tested did not seem to want to drink. They remained dehydrated. An editorial in the Lancet of November 3, 1984, discussed the experimental results of Phillips and his associates and mentioned other findings to support the conclusion that in the elderly, the thirst mechanism is gradually lost.
So now what does this mean, right? All of us have aged people. Many of us do have aged people in our houses. So it is important to prompt them to drink water because they themselves will forget to drink water. So it's very necessary, the caregivers start actually giving the water to the elderly to drink.
Steen, Lundgren, and Isaacson reported in the Lancet of January 12, 1985, that in their long-term observation, they had discovered significant body water loss in the elderly, about 3.5 to 6 liters over 10 years. This is a large loss from the fluid content of the body, mostly from inside the cells.
Now, what does this imply, right? You have a lot of blood flowing. So the blood also has a lot of water content, right? The cells in the body also have water content. But the loss of the water is not taken from the blood. It is lost from inside the cell. So the cells tend to start to shrivel up like prunes, right? A robust cell will be totally full blown. It will be, plumpy, and it's like a shriveled up balloon and a fully blown up balloon. Okay. So the cells start to shrivel up because the water is sucked out of the cells.
To give further scientific support to the new paradigm, let us briefly mention the single most important point of a scientific paper by Ephraim Kachalski-Kadzir of the Weizmann Institute. The far-reaching significance of the finding is that proteins and enzymes function more efficiently in solutions of lower viscosity.
So what does lower viscosity mean? That it is more fluid. It is not more gada. What do you call it? It's not more, I forget the English word of,
dense.
it's not more dense, right? So, I mean, for example, honey has is more viscous than water. So enzymes, chemicals, etc., they'll function and they'll do their function better when there is fluidity in the fluid in which they are dissolved in. The viscosity is lower, it's less.
They need adequate water in their immediate environment to diffuse and work efficiently. In other words, in solutions of higher viscosity, produced by the loss of water from the cell content, the enzyme system within the cell becomes less efficient.
So that means that the cellular functions of each cell start to get affected because of dehydration.
As an analogy, could a competitive swimmer have room to practice in a pool full of kids? Obviously not. The same logic seems to apply to the enzymes in the cells of the body that swim in cell water to contact their chemical partners and to produce a desirable outcome.
So again, if the cell is shriveling up, the amount of space within the cell for the enzymes, etc., to operate naturally starts getting shriveled up, and then they can't do the job properly.
A gradual loss of sensations in the body should be assumed to involve all aspects. A gradual loss of sensations in the body should be assumed to involve all aspects of the sensory mechanisms. As we grow older, we gradually lose sharpness of vision and become dependent on glasses. We lose sexual appetite. Our ability to hear some ranges of sound is gradually lost. Our feelings become less tender and lose alertness. Our emotional stimulation becomes dull and less satisfying, and so on. These are the apparent outward manifestations of a gradual loss of the ability to differentiate and respond to the stimulation of the senses at some time or another in the life of any individual.
So again, this is a natural process, but again, this is prompted by dehydration. The loss of senses is actually prompted by the dehydration process.
Although we do not know how and when the dulling of senses in the body begins, logical interpretation from the above scientific experiments, in addition to my personal observations, has led me to believe that reliance on our sense of thirst and waiting to feel thirsty before we drink water is the basic problem.
So again, we must drink water even if we are not feeling thirsty, right? This is something that we need to constantly be aware of.
The most significant and major complication of dehydration is the loss of a number of essential amino acids that are used to manufacture neurotransmitters.
So again, if there is not enough water in the system, it will not allow the amino acids to be produced, which will not allow the neurotransmitters which are required to regulate the body system to be produced. Okay, so again, it's a chain reaction.
A major hidden advantage to adequate hydration seems to be the increased efficiency of the many thousands of proteins and enzymes whose physiological responsibilities are not yet recognized.
So again, the body produces many chemicals, many kind of proteins, enzymes, which are not yet actually fully understood by science and the medical community, right? Now, again, as soon as dehydration starts taking place in the body, many of them go out of whack. They go out of balance. And then that starts to create different problems.
They too will be more efficiently integrated due to the fact that they are obedient to the influence of free water in their environment. Thus, adequate hydration of the body might be the best insurance against premature aging and an early loss of our different sensory systems.
So as we age, right, each system starts to shut down. In fact, there's a book in the library over here which says how we die. And in that, it clearly indicates how each system starts to shut down when we have a process of dying. But now, again, what he's saying over here is that if we have adequate hydration in the body system, then the system shutdown procedure gets delayed. We can lead a more fuller and a much better life.
My ongoing battle with the medical establishment. It is the dawn of the 21st century, and yet I feel that the practice of medicine is becoming more and more regressive. Yes, people have learned that they are better off if they don't wait to get thirsty, and they are taking measures to prevent their bodies from becoming dehydrated. They have learned that they feel better and are more energetic. They carry their water with them when they go out of the house. They take their water when they exercise. A vast majority are drinking water in preference to manufactured beverages and alcoholic drinks. Schools are now getting wise to the harmful effect of sodas on children and are throwing out the vending machines. This has become a mandate in California, and other states are beginning to follow. Some researchers have found that children's scholastic performance dramatically improves when they drink water instead of the sodas they used to drink.
So this is because there is more water going into the brain, and the cleaning and the cleansing of the brain is done more efficiently, which automatically leads to better brain function.
Yet, all of a sudden, an emeritus professor from Dartmouth Medical School publishes an article in the American Journal of Physiology saying he has not found any scientific reason why people should drink unless they are thirsty. The interesting part of all this is that this article was first posted on the internet and released to the news agencies for its fast track distribution before the paper version of the journal was published later in the year. The media from all over the world went to town on this orchestrated public relations issue.
So again, what happens is, again, when articles are published, they have to be peer reviewed and all that stuff, right? Many times it is very difficult to publish articles in any of these journals because it doesn't withstand the scrutiny that it goes through, whether it's original, whether it's copied from somewhere and all that stuff that happens. But this just went on the internet.
Realizing that this view, if allowed to stand, could potentially harm millions of trusting people from all over the world who might be influenced by the source of information, I wrote a brief scientific rebuttal to the published views and started disseminating the rebuttal. I have published the article on the internet and it is now available for review by others. I am waiting for some reaction from the medical journals that received my rebuttal. I dare say, since my position is contrary to commercial interests of the sick care system, no official reaction would be forthcoming. The article is presented below for those who might be interested in my logic. It is based on the new findings of molecular physiology of dehydration that you now understand.
So again, most of the commercial interests will not allow something like this, so simple and so easy to implement, to get into vogue.
You see why the information on water in this book is something you need to cherish. I don't believe you will get its benefits from the medical establishment in this country anytime soon. Waiting to get thirsty is to die prematurely and very painfully. Heinz Walton, MD, an emeritus professor of Dartmouth Medical School, has ventured the opinion that there is no scientific merit in drinking 8-ounce glasses of water a day and not waiting to get thirsty before correcting dehydration. This view, published in the American Journal of Physiology, August 2002 is the very foundation of all that is wrong with modern medicine, which is costing this nation $1.7 trillion a year, rising at a rate of 12% every year. Dr. Walton's view, in my opinion, is as absurd as waiting for the final stages of a killer infection before giving the patient the appropriate antibiotics. His views are based on the erroneous assumption that dry mouth is an accurate sign of dehydration. Like the colleagues he says he has consulted, Dr. Walton does not seem to be aware of an important paradigm shift in medicine. All past views in medicine were based on the wrong assumption that it is the solutes in the body that regulate all functions and that the solvent has no direct role in any of the body's physiological functions. In medical schools, it is taught that water is only a solvent, a packing material, and a means of transport, that water has no metabolic function of its own. I have come across this level of ignorance about the primary physiological role of water at another Ivy League medical school from another eminent professor of physiology who, like Dr. Walton, researched and taught the water regulatory mechanisms of the kidney to medical students and doctors. Only when I asked him what hydrolysis is did the penny drop and he admit the scientific fact that water is a nutrient and does indeed possess a dominant metabolic role in all physiological functions of the body.
So again, the chemicals is not the dominant, the determinator and does not dominate all the functions of the body system. It is actually water, which actually is the dominant thing which regulates and monitors and helps to create homeostasis in the body system.
Dr. Walton's emphasis on the water regulatory role of the kidneys limits his knowledge to the body's mechanisms of deficit management of the water needs of the body. He seems to base his views of thirst management of the body on the vital roles of vasopressin, the antidiuretic hormone, and the renin-angiotensin system, the elements that get engaged in the drought management programs of the body when the body has already become dehydrated.
So vasopressin, right? This is a chemical which is released even in asthma, right? So that restricts the release of water into the system. And many times you have these medications which suppress this chemical, which is actually a very good chemical for our body system because it controls dehydration.
Indeed, he thinks dehydration is a state of the body when it loses 5% of its water content, and that one should wait until at some level of such water loss, the urge to drink some kind of fluid will correct the water deficit in the body. This view might have seemed plausible 25 years ago. Today, it exposes the tragic limitations of knowledge of the human physiology that is available to a prestigious medical school in America.
So again, why wait for a problem to occur before putting a solution in place? Take preventive measures, right? Why wait for 5% of the fluid to get down before you start replenishing it? Replenish it before.
In his recently published and widely reported assertions, Dr. Walton does not take into consideration the fact that water is a nutrient. Its vital hydrolytic role would be lost to all the physiological functions that would be affected by its shortage in its osmotically free state.
So what does hydrolytic mean, right? When, again, I mentioned this before, when the water is penetrating the membrane of the cells, electric currents are generated. And that is very vital to the functioning of the body system. If there is shortage, then that current stops being available to the body system. which again causes, you're going into a vicious downward spiral.
Another oversight is the fact that it is the interior of the cells of the body that would become drastically dehydrated. In dehydration, 66% of the water loss is from the interior of the cells. 26% of the loss is from the extracellular fluid volume, and only 8% of the loss is borne by the blood tissue in the vascular system, which constricts within its network of capillaries and maintains the integrity of the circulation system.
So again, very clearly, right? The least loss or the least amount of water due to dehydration is taken out of the blood flow, which is the most important fluid in our body system. The rest of it, it is taken out from inside the cell, and the fluid which is there around the cells, right? So that gets extracted. So fibromyalgia, etc., could be a cause because of dehydration, where the extracellular fluid, which is the fluid which is outside the cells, gets extracted.
Philippa M. Wiggin has shown that the mechanism that controls or brings about the effective function of the cation pumps utilizes the energy transforming property of water, the solvent. The source of energy for cation transport, or ATP synthesis, lies in increases in chemical potentials with increasing hydration of small cations and polyphosphate anions in the highly structured interfacial aqueous phase of the two phosphorylated intermediates.
So ATP, okay, it's like the batteries in the cells, and that gets generated when the water molecules are going through the membrane, right? That energy gets generated and is stored in the ATP cells. Now, if that water is not going through, there's less generation of ATP in the cells. And when less ATP is there, the cells cannot sustain themselves. Okay, so in simple terms, basically that's it. There's a reaction which takes place, which does not take place if the water is not available.
Waiting to get thirsty when the body fluids become concentrated before thirst is induced. One loses the energy generating properties of water in the dehydrated cells of the body. This is a major reason why we should prevent dehydration rather than wait to correct it. This new understanding of the role of water in cation exchange is enough justification to let the body engage in prudent surplus water management rather than forcing it into drought and deficit water management, which is what Dr. Walton is recommending people do.
So again, naturally, rather than create a drought, if we have a little excess, which can easily be eliminated by the body system, is a better place to be in than in a drought state or in a water deficit state of the system.
In his research on the conformational change in biological macromolecules, Ephraim Kachalski-Kadzir of the Weizmann Institute of Science has shown that the proteins and enzymes of the body function more efficiently in solutions of lower viscosity. Thus, water lost from the interior of the cells would adversely affect their efficiency of function.
This is something we already spoke about. The more viscous the solution or the fluids inside the cell makes it more difficult for the enzymes and the other proteins in the body to actually function. Shimla, just 1 second.
Thus, water lost from the interior of the cells would adversely affect the efficiency of function. This finding alone negates Dr. Walton's view that we should let dehydration get established before drinking water. Since it is desirable that all cells of the body should function efficiently within their physiological roles, it would be more prudent to optimally hydrate the body rather than wait for the drought management programs of the body to induce thirst. Furthermore, it is much easier for the body to deal with a slight surplus of water than to suffer from its shortfall and have to ration and allocate water to vital organs at the expense of less vital functions of the body.
So again, as soon as the drought management system comes into play, it takes time for it to shut down, right? So in spite of water being there, it will still keep running. And then that creates more problems. So it's always better to regulate it right in the beginning rather than allow the problem to emerge and then start to deal with it.
The outcome of constantly circulating concentrated blood in the vascular system is truly an invitation to catastrophe.
So again, one thing that we have seen, and we have seen it because we have the dark field microscope over here. We've taken blood samples, and people who are dehydrated, the red blood cells are clumped up together, right? Now, if the red blood cells are clumped up together, naturally, when they go to the, number one, when the blood is going to the lungs, there is less surface area for the absorption of the oxygen to take place. If it's clumped up together in the intestine, it will absorb nutrients in a more restricted manner. But when the blood is good, right, it is properly hydrated and there is good hydration and electrical potential in the blood, in the blood, the cells are all straight, they are all open. So the entire surface of the blood, the cell is available for absorption of the nutrients as well as oxygen. Plus, if the blood is clumped up, then the blood cannot flow. Like over here in the peripheries, right, in the top of the fingers, for example, the capillaries are very, very small. So only one red blood cell at a time can go through. Now, if the blood is clumped up, then the blood is not going to reach the extremities of the body system. Then that starts, you start feeling cold and all that stuff starts to happen because the blood is not reaching. Again, it is caused by dehydration, right? So it says clearly that constantly circulating concentrated blood in the vascular system is an invitation to catastrophe. Because if the blood is not reaching every part of the body and reaching every cell, then that definitely there's going to be a problem in the body system.
The outcome of constantly circulating concentrated blood in the vascular system is truly an invitation to catastrophe. The tragedy of waiting to get thirsty hits home when it is realized that the sharpness of thirst perception is gradually lost as we get older. Phillips and Associates have shown that after 24 hours of water deprivation, the elderly still do not recognize they are thirsty.
So again, this is very important, why we need to keep offering water to our elders and tell them to drink, even in spite of the fact that they are not feeling thirsty.
The important findings is that despite their obvious physiologic need, the elderly subjects were not markedly thirsty. Bruce and Associates have shown that between the ages of 20 and 70, the ratio of water inside the cells to the amount of water outside the cells drastically changes from 1.1 to 0.8.
So what does this imply? 1.1 means there's more water inside the cell than outside the cell. And 0.8 means that there's more water outside the cell than inside the cell. Now, naturally, if the cell doesn't have water, it cannot function properly.
Undoubtedly, this marked change in the intracellular water balance would not take place if the osmotic push and pull of life could favor water diffusion through the cell membranes everywhere in the body. at the rate of 10 is to minus 3 centimeters per second. Only by relying on the reverse osmotic process of expanding the extracellular water content of the body so as to filter and inject load-free water into vital cells by the actions of vasopressin and renin-angiotensin aldosterone systems, when the body physiology is constantly forced to rely on its drought management programs. Could such a drastic change in the water balance of the body result?
So vasopressin is the process by which the water molecules go inside or into the cells.
Two other scientific discoveries are disregarded when Dr. Walton recommends people should wait until they get thirsty before they drink water. One, the initiation of the thirst mechanisms is not triggered by vasopressin and the renin-angiotensin systems. These systems are involved only in water conservation and forced hydration of the cells.
So forced hydration means that pushing water into the cells.
Thirst is initiated when the sodium potassium ATPase pump is inadequately hydrated. It is water that generates voltage gradient by adequately hydrating the pump proteins in the neurotransmission systems of the body.
So again, when the water is pushing through, it generates an electrical frequency, generates an electrical current or voltage.
This is the reason the brain tissue is 85% water and cannot endure the level of thirst-inducing dehydration that is considered safe in the article published by Dr. Walton. 2. The missing piece of the scientific puzzle in the water regulatory mechanisms of the body, which has been exposed since 1987 and which Dr. Walton and his colleagues need to know, is the coupled activity of the neurotransmitter histamine to the efficiency of the cation exchange, its role in the initiation of the drought management programs, and its role in the catabolic processes when the body is becoming more and more dehydrated. Based on the primary water regulatory functions of histamine and the active role of water in all the physiologic and metabolic functions of the body, as the hydrolytic initiator of the all solute functions, the symptoms of thirst are those produced by excess histamine activity and its subordinate mechanisms, which get engaged in the drought management programs of the body.
So again, histamine regulates the water, right? So again, it is when a person has antihistamine tablets are there, but then you need to hydrate. Instead of taking antihistamine tablets, you should hydrate yourself, because histamine comes into the system when there is a drought in the body. Otherwise it is not active.
They include asthma, allergies, and major pains of the body, such as heartburn, colitis pain, rheumatoid joint pain, back pain, migraine headaches, fibromyalgic pains, and even anginal pain.
So all these are pains where when there is dehydration in the body, and histamine starts to come into play when these pains, etc., appear. So there is a misconception that histamine is creating the pain, but histamine is acting to regulate the water, not to create the pain. So many people start taking antihistamine pills to remove histamine, but actually that's a wrong thing to do. That's what Dr. Batman-Gilich is saying.
And since vasopressin and the renin-angiotensin aldosterone activity in the body are subordinates to the activation of histamine, their role in raising the blood pressure is a part of the drought management programs of the body. Their purpose of forced delivery of water into vital cells demands a greater injection pressure to counteract the direction of osmotic pull of water from inside the cells of the body when it is dehydrated.
So again, histamine acts to put more water into the cells rather than taking it out of the cells. So that means it wants to retain the water in the system.
From the new perspective of my 22 years of clinical and scientific research into molecular physiology of dehydration and the peer-reviewed introduction of a paradigm shift in medical science, recognizing histamine as a neurotransmitter in charge of the water regulation of the body, I can safely say that 60 million Americans with hypertension, the 110 million with chronic pains, the 15 million with diabetes, the 17 million with asthma, the 50 million with allergies, the nearly 100 million obese people in America, and more, all did exactly as Dr. Walton recommends. They all waited to get thirsty. Had they realized water is a natural antihistamine and a more effective diuretic, I believe these people would have saved the agony of their health problems.
So again, very clearly, water has antihistamine problems, which many people feel that is the precursor to many diseases.
Antihistamine properties.
Yeah. So water has antihistamine properties. Now, so you don't need to regulate or take antihistamine tablets to take care of the issues that you are facing. You can stop here.